If you agree that real heroes don't always wear capes, or even get the respect they deserve, then make sure to like and subscribe, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story, it's a wake-up call. They said it was probably junk. Just another dusty display case hung on a forgotten wall, barely noticed by the nursing staff who walked past it every day. Some thought it held old photographs, maybe a wedding ring or two. Typical mementos of a life long faded. But when Mr. Parker didn't wake up that morning, when his quiet breathing simply stopped, and the nurses gathered his things to clear the room for the next patient, one curious janitor finally opened it. The hinges creaked, almost protesting, like even the box itself knew it hadn't been touched in decades. Inside were medals that didn't even look American, strange shapes, foreign inscriptions, colors no one recognized. Nestled beside them, folded with surgical precision, was a letter, yellowed from time, signed, not by a friend or relative, but by a general. Not just any general. One whose name had an entire wing of the VA hospital named after him. Suddenly the room wasn't so quiet anymore. Suddenly the nurses weren't rolling their eyes. Suddenly everyone wanted to know, who was Daniel Parker? Because before that moment, to most of them, he was just another old man eating applesauce and staring at the wall. But to his daughter Emma, standing at the doorway that morning, numb with grief and pride intertwining like ivy in her chest, he had never been just anything. He was her father. He was a soldier. And she refused to let the world forget it. Fast forward 5 months. Emma Parker, now 27, tightened her grip on a stack of enrollment forms as she waited in the main lobby of Crestwood University. She stood straight, not out of confidence, but obligation. Someone had to stand tall. Someone had to remember the man whose medals were now locked in her back, pressed against her ribs like armor. Her dad had always wanted her to finish school, not because he cared about degrees or titles. No, Daniel Parker believed in purpose. If you can serve others with your mind, he had once told her, that's just another form of uniform. She had repeated that sentence to herself every morning since he died. It kept her from collapsing. It also kept her from turning around and walking out of the building right then. Because behind her, not even trying to whisper, 2 college guys snickered just loud enough to be heard. Yo, check out Daddy's girl, one muttered. She even brought his dog Tax. What's she expecting? Extra credit for patriotism? The other laughed. Probably thinks coming here with a sob story will get her free tuition. Emma didn't turn, didn't flinch, didn't grant them the dignity of reaction. But her heartbeat drummed like a war march. She wished, more than anything, her father were here to look them in the eyes. Not to yell. He never yelled. He would have just stared. Calm. Measured. The kind of gaze that made lesser men shrink without a word. But he wasn't here. He was ashes in a brass urn on her windowsill. And she had to be his voice. Then came the push. Hey, uniform girl. One of the boys said louder now, clearly enjoying himself. You lose your army escort? Don't worry. We'll protect you. A couple nearby students chuckled. Some looked away awkwardly. No one stepped in. Emma inhaled. Slow, steady, controlled. She had seen this kind of cruelty before. It was never about her. It was about their need to feel tall by stomping on someone else. She could take it. She had taken worse. But when she heard one of them scoff, her dad's probably one of those wannabe vets who never saw combat. Something inside her cracked. Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her back. Fingers brushed the ribbon metal. Not 1, not 2, 12. Campaign stars. 4 commendations. Marks of blood. Marks of fire. Marks of survival. She didn't pull them out. Not yet. She just placed her hand over them like a promise. Not today, she thought. You don't get to win today. And then, just as she was about to turn around and give them a response her father would have been proud of, the air shifted. The sound of footsteps echoed through the marble-floored lobby. Not casual, not rushed. Commanding. Crisp. Every heel strike like a drumbeat. The kind that belonged to someone trained to walk with purpose. The kind she knew by heart. The kind she grew up measuring her own footsteps against whenever she tried on her father's boots as a kid. The laughter stopped behind her. Conversations froze. Even the enrollment officer paused mid-keystroke. Emma didn't turn yet. She didn't have to. She could feel it. Authority. Discipline. Reverence. The kind of presence that made every civilian spine straighten without knowing why. Then, a voice. Deep. Controlled. Resonant with decades of command. Excuse me, it said, directing itself behind her. Did I just hear you questioning Sergeant Daniel Parker? Emma's throat closed. Her vision blurred. Slowly she turned. Standing 10 feet away was a Marine captain in full dress blues. Ribbons gleaming. Silver oak leaves shining. And his eyes, locked not on Emma, but on the two boys behind her, burned with the kind of quiet fury only earned on battlefields. One of the kids stammered, we didn't. We were just," but the captain didn't even bother acknowledging them. Instead, he strode forward, straight past them, straight to Emma. And before anyone could understand what was happening, he stopped, stood tall, and snapped into a perfect, razor-sharp salute. The sound of that salute, sharp, sudden, echoing like a crack of thunder across marble, seemed to freeze time itself. Emma didn't breathe, didn't blink. For a split second she forgot where she was, forgot the lobby, forgot the two boys behind her who were now motionless statues of regret. Because in that moment, for the first time since her father's passing, she didn't feel alone. The Marine's hand remained firmly at his brow, unwavering, carved from discipline and memory. People around them stood stunned, unsure if they were witnessing ceremony, confrontation, or something sacred. Emma's lips parted, but no sound came. She tried to speak, to say I'm not him, to explain that I'm just his daughter, that she didn't deserve this, but before she could gather herself, the Marine slowly lowered his hand. His eyes, sharp yet softened with something she couldn't quite place, sorrow, gratitude, reverence, met hers. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "I'm Captain Elias Reyes, United States Marine Corps." He didn't offer a handshake. Instead, he nodded toward her back, the one holding her father's medals. "Those belonged to Sergeant Daniel Parker." Emma swallowed hard. "He was my father." A flicker, pain, respect, history, crossed the captain's face. "He was more than that," he said. "He was my sergeant, my mentor, my lifeline." He turned then, not to her, but to the entire lobby, as if the walls themselves needed to hear. "Kandahar Province, 2004, ambush. I was 22, bleeding out. Thought that was it. And then, out of nowhere, this man drags me across 200 yards of open fire. Bullet in his leg, shrapnel in his shoulder. Didn't stop, didn't fall, didn't falter. His voice didn't tremble. Marines didn't tremble. But the silence around him did. I lived because of him. I became a captain because of him. I am here because of him." He glanced toward the mockers, those two now as pale as ghosts. "And you will stand." Now, they didn't hesitate. They rose like puppets on strings. "Stand properly," Reyes said coldly. "Back straight, shoulders squared, eyes forward. You're in the presence of a soldier." Their shoulders jerked upright, their eyes fixed forward, as ordered. They looked like children suddenly learning what consequence felt like. Emma's heartbeat pounded, not with anger now, but with something heavier, something almost unbearable. Gratitude, validation, homecoming. She had spent months trying to convince the world her father mattered. And here was the proof, standing tall in dress blues, declaring it for all to hear. Captain Reyes turned back to her. His gaze softened. "Your father once told me," he murmured, "if you can't repay a debt, pass it forward." He paused. "So that's what I'm here to do." And before she could react, he reached into his uniform jacket and withdrew a folded document. Thick paper, embossed crest. "Official. This," he said, handing it to her, "is my recommendation letter. For your enrollment. For your scholarship. For your future. If your father wanted you here, I'll make sure no one stands in your way." Emma stared at it. Her fingers trembled as she took it. Inside, bold black ink, was a statement signed by Captain Elias Reyes, certifying that Emma Parker was the daughter of Sergeant Daniel Parker, honorably recognized for valor under fire and international distinction in joint operations. It didn't just recommend acceptance. It demanded it. The enrollment officer behind the desk, who had up until now remained respectfully silent, cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said slowly, addressing Emma with newfound reverence, "if you'll allow me, I'll personally expedite your approval." She nodded mutely. She still hadn't fully processed what was happening. Her body stood in that lobby, but her mind was a storm of memories. Her father teaching her how to tie combat boots, his steady voice reading her bedtime stories about courage, his hand squeezing hers the day he was admitted to the nursing home. He had always walked like a warrior, even when the world saw only a limping old man. Now, finally, They saw what she had always known. But Captain Reyes wasn't done. He faced the lobby again. "Let this be a lesson," he said, voice rising. Not with anger, but with something far more commanding: truth. You don't get to decide who a hero is by what they look like. You don't earn the right to mock sacrifice you've never made. He swept his gaze across the room. Courage doesn't fade with wrinkles. Bravery doesn't retire. Respect is earned, and when earned, it is owed. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the air seemed afraid to stir. Then, without warning, the captain did something that made every jaw drop. He stepped beside Emma, placed himself shoulder to shoulder with her, and saluted again. Not to her father this time, but to her. "On behalf of those he saved," he said, "I salute the one who carries his legacy." Emma couldn't hold back anymore. Tears spilled freely. She didn't bother hiding them, didn't lower her head in shame. No, she stood taller, stronger, as if her father's spirit rose within her spine. She brought her hand up, clumsy at first, but steadying, and she returned the salute. The lobby erupted, first into silence, then thunderous applause. Not polite claps, not forced gestures, but raw, reverent acknowledgement. People stood. Students, staff, even the janitor leaning on his mop. The two boys who mocked her, still standing at attention, looked like they wanted to disappear. But no one paid them any mind anymore. They had become irrelevant. Truth had spoken. Honor had entered the room. And respect, real, earned respect, had found its rightful heir. The applause eventually faded, but the weight of that moment didn't. It lingered in the air like incense, reverent, unshakable. People began to return to their seats, whispering not in mockery or boredom now, but in awe. Some wiped their eyes when they thought no one was looking. Others exchanged glances that said we were here, like witnesses to history. Emma lowered her hand, still trembling slightly from the salute. Captain Reyes relaxed his posture, but only slightly. Though the room had eased, his presence remained sharp, like a drawn blade waiting to be sheathed. He leaned toward her, his voice quiet now, intimate, almost brotherly. "Your father would have been proud," he said. Emma exhaled shakily. I wish he could have seen this." Reyes shook his head gently. "He did." She blinked. He wasn't being poetic. He said it like a fact. "Men like him don't leave this world," he continued softly. "They step back and let those they train carry the torch." He paused, then added, "You carried it well today." Before she could respond, footsteps approached. Not the hesitant shuffle of students avoiding eye contact, but steady ones, confident yet humble. It was the janitor, the same one who had opened her father's shadow box that morning 5 months ago. He looked older up close, with weathered skin and soft gray eyes. He held something in his hands. "Miss Parker," he said, voice low. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you should have this." He offered her a small wooden frame. Inside was a photograph, faded, grainy. It showed a young Daniel Parker, impossibly young, grinning with 2 other soldiers in some sandy nowhere. They were shirtless, holding mess tins and laughing, carefree despite the rifles slung behind them. Emma's breath caught. She recognized the face on the left, her father. But the man in the middle, the one with a shaved head and defiant grin, looked strangely familiar. She glanced up at Captain Reyes. He chuckled softly. "Believe it or not," he said, "that was my father." Emma blinked. "You're second-generation military," he said. "Your dad pulled my father out of a burning convoy in '91. Guess saving Reyes' men became kind of a tradition for him." He scratched his cheek, looking away almost bashfully. "Never thought I'd get the chance to repay either of those debts. Guess life is strange that way." Emma stared at the photo again, a realization crashing into her like a wave. Her father hadn't just saved one life. He had set entire legacies in motion. Generations. Ripples she hadn't even known existed. The enrollment officer stepped forward again, hands clasped respectfully. "Miss Parker," he said, now addressing her with the kind of formality usually reserved for visiting dignitaries. "Your admission is officially approved. Full scholarship under our Heroic Families Initiative." Emma looked confused. "I didn't apply under that program." He smiled warmly. "You didn't have to." She stared at the paper in her hand, then at Captain Reyes, then at the people surrounding her. All her life, she had carried her father's honor like a shield. But for the first time, she felt it wasn't just hers to carry. It was shared, upheld, recognized. She wasn't defending a memory anymore. She was continuing it. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Captain Reyes walked her outside. The sun was lowering in that soft, golden way that makes everything feel sacred. They stopped by a bench beneath a wide oak tree. He turned to her. "I'm hosting a memorial run next month," he said, "dedicated to undocumented heroes, men and women who served quietly and died forgotten." He reached into his jacket one last time. This time he pulled out not a paper, but a small, rectangular card. A patch, embroidered with 2 silver stars and a red stripe. This was his, he said, from his first overseas mission. "I kept it after the ambush. I told myself I'd return it when I became the kind of man he'd salute." He handed it to her. Emma held it gently, like glass. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. Reyes shook his head. "You don't need to say anything. Just keep doing what you're doing." Then, for the first time that day, he smiled. Not the formal smile of an officer, but the easy smile of a friend. "And when you graduate, call me. Marines are always looking for good leaders." Emma laughed softly. It wasn't a laugh of dismissal, but one of realization. She finally understood what her father meant when he said purpose was another kind of uniform. She didn't need to wear camouflage to serve. She just needed to stand when it counted. They parted ways quietly. No dramatics, no grand send-off. But as Emma walked back toward the parking lot, she noticed something strange. People she passed didn't look away anymore. They nodded. They smiled. Some even placed their hands over their hearts as she walked by. Not for her, she realized, but for him, living through her. She reached her car, opened the door, then paused. Slowly, deliberately, she reached into her bag and pulled out one of her father's medals. She pinned it to her shirt. Not as a costume, not as decoration, but as a declaration. As the sun sank behind the horizon, she whispered into the glowing sky, "You're not forgotten, Dad. Not while I'm still standing." And somewhere, on a battlefield long gone, in a hospital room long emptied, in the hearts of men he had saved, Sergeant Daniel Parker stood too.